Would you like to win some money on Thursday night? Of course you would. Well, you're in the right place, my friend. These are the players you must have to win on Thursday. And we could start with $9,200 DJ Moore, who has a very juicy matchup, one that he just took advantage of a couple weeks ago. Yes, these teams played in week 8, just 2 weeks ago. And the matchup is against Atlanta that ranks 26th in secondary. And they were a good secondary earlier in the season, but then they suffered injuries to their starting 3 cornerbacks. Take a look. You see, as of right now, Casey Hayward remains on the IR, and AJ Terrell is continuing to battle a lower body leg injury. So this is something to monitor if he plays Thursday. He has not been playing lately, and if he doesn't play again, another great spot for DJ Moore, who ended up having a season best 27.5 points last time against this same Falcons secondary, and now over his last 3 games is averaging over 9 targets per game, and he's very good. We know he's very good. He's number 6 this season at beating man coverage. It really just comes down to, can PJ Walker, who's expected to start in this one, and Baker Mayfield, if he ends up taking over in this game, can they just get the dude the ball? I'm expecting 7+ targets in this one. I take DJ Moore over 57.5 receiving yards. I actually have him projected in the 70s for receiving yards on prizepicks.com, and you get a free bet up to $100 when you use the link in the description below, code SAL22 on prizepicks. All right, now let's jump over to the Atlanta side and talk about their running backs. Cordell Patterson returned last week, and yeah, he was limited. He played under 40% of the snaps, but he wasn't limited in terms of touches. He had 14 touches last week, and he had a nice game. And now he faces the defense that just gave up 50+ points to Joe Mixon and could not tackle to save their lives. The problem is that Patterson is pretty damn expensive on this slate. I mean, $1,600 more than anybody else and nearly $12,000 total. He definitely has to score a touchdown and likely has to find the end zone twice, but he saw 5 of the 6 goal line snaps last week, so it's possible. And he'll face a Carolina team that will let you check it down to the running back. They've given up the 2nd most points to the running back position, obviously skewed from the matchup versus Joe Mixon last week, but they've still, before that matchup, were top 10 in points allowed. And then there's the RB2 now, the rookie Tyler Algier, who honestly, it's really tough to like him, especially given the price point. I mean, Algier is $6,200 now as a clear backup running back, and the dude, there's not much to like about him so far as a rookie. I mean, he ranks 59th in running back efficiency. That's not good. He only has 5 total targets this season, and now Patterson is back, and he's not seeing any of the goal line touches. As you can see right here, Patterson saw 4 out of the 5 goal line snaps, and Caleb Huntley was actually the other player. So what this means is you have an overpriced Algier who's not efficient when he gets the ball. He's not seeing targets, and he's not seeing red zone usage. So how the heck is he supposed to pay off this price tag? The simple answer is he won't, and neither will Caleb Huntley. You see, Caleb Huntley is also overpriced at $4,800. I've never seen a running back 3 on a team who also isn't that great be priced this high. Last week when Patterson was quote-unquote limited, Huntley only played 13 snaps, only saw a handful of carries, and you can expect less coming into this game, probably 3 to 4 touches. I'm not interested. But I am interested in this next player who will probably come in a little bit lower owned because there's a risk attached to his name. And that would be PJ Walker, who didn't look good last week. He got pulled, but in his defense, they dropped like 5 passes. So, I mean, a lot of it was on the wide receivers and the tight ends in this game, but also Walker wasn't looking that great, but he's expected to start this week, and he has a juicy matchup. He'll face this bottom 5 Falcons secondary that allowed him to have a season best game, over 20 fantasy points, and get this, he had 317 passing yards in this game. In his other 4 appearances this season combined, he has 306 passing yards. So in this one game against the Atlanta secondary, he had more alone. Now, the obvious risk is that there's going to be a short leash, most likely here, if he's not performing in the first half. The benefit is that he has a matchup that he should be able to perform in the first half with a couple of nice receivers now. Now, this isn't for the faint of heart. It's over 165.5 passing yards for PJ Walker, who I have projected for 220 yards, assuming he doesn't get pulled. Again, if you like a little bit of risk in your life, if he plays well in the first half, he's going to go over this number. Now let's start discussing some of the pass catching options from the Atlanta side. And we'll start with Kyle Pitts, who's just 7K. Honestly, too cheap for this slate as a 23-point team total, pretty solid, and he has 16 targets over the last 2 weeks. He also leads every single tight end in the NFL with a 33% target rate, meaning 1 out of every 3 routes that he runs, he's earning a target. The problem is he needs high volume. You can't just have 5 targets in a game and expect to pay off often, especially at this price tag. Didn't even score 5 fantasy points last week. But it's really not Pitts' fault. I mean, his quarterback just stinks. Mariota has not been good. Only 66% of Pitts' passes have been catchable, ranking 33rd amongst tight ends. That means 1 out of every 3 targets he's getting is pointless. It's nowhere near being catchable. So in this price range, I'm just going to be preferring DJ Moore and some of the other players we're about to talk about. And one of those players is Terrace Marshall, who I was surprised to be priced all the way up at $8,400, but it makes sense because he's slowly breaking out. He just scored his first touchdown last week, and we saw him get his first big game against Atlanta a couple weeks back. And that game included a career high 9 targets, almost 13 fantasy points, and a career high 87 receiving yards. And last week he scored that touchdown like we mentioned, and he did it on a career high 96% of the snaps. He is finally showing off his 2nd round pedigree where he had 23 touchdowns his final 2 college seasons. And I'm a little surprised by this prop. I've actually made created an official prop that I'm taking on the week, meaning I have $50 on it. We can talk about that later with another official prop. I have him over 30.5 receiving yards. I have him pushing over 50 yards in this game. Again, a really nice matchup against Atlanta secondary. Take this with a free bet up to $100. Link in the description below on prizepicks.com. All right, now maybe the most interesting part of the slate is the Panthers backfield. And we could start with Deontay Foreman, who's $7,800 and potentially could be one of the best plays on the slate if some things break his way. Now, last week, the Panthers got down big. They're only slight underdogs in this one, so I'm not expecting them to get down by 15 plus points, but it ended up taking Deontay Foreman off the field. Raheem Blackshear ended up seeing a lot more of the passing downs. But it's hard to forget Foreman going off for 30 plus points, 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards just 2 weeks ago against this same Atlanta Falcons defense. That's a fine defense overall. He just ended up finding the end zone, and he's just a good rusher on the ground. Now, the thing to follow here is what happens with $5,800 Chuba Hubbard, who has been missing with a lower body injury the last couple of weeks. He'll be questionable on a short week heading into this one. If he does not play, well then yeah, Foreman's going to look like a slam dunk play at $7,800. But it's worth mentioning that in week 7, the last time we saw Hubbard play before he left with injury, yeah, he only played 23 snaps, 4 less than Foreman, but before the injury occurred, he had 61% of the snaps, was the clear starting running back, playing 85% of the passing down snaps. Now, I assume over the last couple of weeks from the good play from Foreman that he's earned the early down role, but don't expect it to be a clear role for him. It'll probably be somewhat of a split with the passing downs going to Chuba Hubbard. Now, if Hubbard is out, I love my guy Raheem Blackshear, who we mentioned as a deep league ad a couple of weeks ago, and he has already paid off for you, scoring last week about 15 fantasy points, 9 touches, finds the end zone, and what is his number one trait? He had a top 10% or top 10 of all time college target share for a running back. 25% of his team's targets he earned, and then last week, he has 40 receiving yards on 4 receptions. He's a great pass catcher. Now, the only way you're considering him is if Hubbard is out. Otherwise, he'll play maybe 10% of the snaps, and he can't not be in play. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to subscribe for more. Now, maybe one of your safer and potentially best play in the slate is Marcus Mariota when you factor in the other guys around him. Patterson is really expensive. PJ Walker has some job security issues. So at $10,200, I believe he's my favorite pay-up option above the DJ Moore price range. Look at a matchup versus just a fine to bad secondary of the Panthers. They rank 21st in the NFL, borderline bottom 10. I have Mariota projected for 2 more points than anybody else on the slate in the DFS blueprint down below on Patreon, which will help you. It's a 5-step system to actually win more and stop hitting the deposit button on these DFS sites. Now, Mariota also had his best game of the season when he played against this Panthers team 2 weeks ago. He put up 250 yards, a season high, 24 points, a season high, 3 touchdowns, the only time he's done that. And the nice thing was he faces a Panthers secondary that plays a lot of zone defense, and that's exactly what the Falcons want. They want to check it down to Cordell Patterson, to the other running backs, to Kyle Pitts. So this sets up nicely again for Marcus Mariota here. Because of that, I've taken him over 158.5 passing yards. I have him for around 210 yards in this game, and I make him an official bet as well. I combine that with Terrace Marshall. I put $50 on these two to win 150. This is the official bet for all of you beautiful viewers out there if you would like to take this on prizepicks.com. You get a free bet up to $100, so this would be the one I would use that on with the link in the description below. Okay, let's talk more of these Atlanta pass catchers because they're kind of tricky this week. An $8,200 Drake London, I'm expecting no ownership to be here. That will be where the positive comes in, but he has not topped 40 receiving yards now in 6 straight games. It's concerning. 20% of his targets are not catchable from Marcus Mariota. This is not good news. And it's also not good news that he ranks 60th in the NFL with just 9.8 yards of his average target distance. He's not being targeted downfield at all at this point. It's not that good. It means that he's not getting big plays. If he's not being targeted downfield and they're not getting in the red zone often, and when they do, they run the ball, it makes it hard to see a big score and pay off this price tag. So again, the positive will be he is lower owned compared to guys around him, but give me Terrace Marshall, DJ Moore, and a very cheaper, strangely, Kyle Pitts. Now, this slate doesn't have a lot of values, but Tommy Tremble at $3,200, the tight end for the Panthers, is in play. Last week, you ended up seeing him run 18 routes, 8 more than Ian Thomas, but he's a better tight end at getting open, used more in the red zone. He earned 4 targets. He's now earned 4 targets in back-to-back games, and they like going to him in the red zone more than any other tight end. Keeps him in play. Now, a player who will probably be fool's gold is Laviska Shenault at $3,000. I expect him to pick up maybe 10 to 15% ownership. He's dealing with some hamstring injuries as he has been basically all year, so be sure to track that. But here's the thing. He ran just 2 routes last week. He was not really involved in the offense, and on the entire season, he only has 18 total routes run. That is terrible. That's what most guys, like you see Shi Smith right here, ran 27 last week, will run in a week. The thing people might look at is he ran 11 of those 18 routes against Atlanta. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, a decent game, but that's fool's gold. Normally, when a guy like Laviska Shenault for his skill set runs 11 routes, you're seeing at best 2 targets and probably 0 to 1. So track any potential injury news for Shenault there, but I still don't think he's all that good of a play play on this slate. I think he's actually a bad play. And now if we go back to Atlanta, the other pass catchers here like Omid Zaccheaus, yeah, he's the clear wide receiver 2 on this team if we count Pitts as a tight end, but the problem is he played a decent amount of the snaps last week, 72%, ran 21 routes, but he only saw 2 targets. And the issue, you have Drake London, you have Kyle Pitts, and now Cordell Patterson is back. You're going to be the 4th option in a Marcus Mariota run-first offense. That does not sound good. His one saving grace is that he does have 3 deep targets, so maybe he sees a deep target and it pays off this week, but for his price point, I'm not going there. Similar things can be said for Damiere Byrd, who's $4,400. Look, he ran 15 routes and saw 1 target last week, but he's going to be the 5th best option in this Marcus Mariota offense. Now, his upside is that 5 of his 10 targets on the season have been deep targets, and we saw this pay off just a couple weeks back in this same matchup against Carolina, where he goes 3 catches, 67 yards, and a touchdown on 6 targets. He saw 60% of his season targets in this game. Again, like Laviska Shenault, I think he'll be probably over-owned due to this, but he actually has some legit juice because he's seeing about a deep target per game. Can that pay off here? I'm going to say no. Now, as we go through this, you can experience that we don't have a lot of good values. And what that simply means is that the kickers and defenses are going to have to be in play. The Falcons are pretty expensive on this slate, but it makes sense. I prefer the kickers here, both kickers strongly in play, and I'll take for the price discount the Panthers defense over the Falcons, who I honestly have projected in the DFS blueprint down below. I have them projected for similar points here. So those are probably your best value plays on the slate, the kickers and defense, even over your Tommy Trembles. Other than that, some guys who will definitely be on the field a good amount. Shi Smith, he's the clear wide receiver 3 for Carolina. Last week, he ended up running 27 routes. He played on 39 snaps, which ended up being 80% of the snaps. That's very good usage. The issue is he has just 4 targets over his last 4 games. He had no catches versus Atlanta's really bad secondary a couple weeks back, so he's not the greatest of players. If Baker ends up getting in the game, maybe he checks down to the slot a little bit more. He likes the slot, but for the most part, not a great play. And then after that, the rest of our values, it's tough. You have Ian Thomas, a clear backup tight end. So far, he only has 6 targets over his last 4 games, not using the red zone all that much, needs a touchdown or he's a bust. Kadero Hodge saw a couple targets last week, but he's only running like 5 to 6 routes. And then there's nothing. There's backup tight ends who probably run 5 routes, maybe see a target. So we really need to rely on the kickers and defenses on the slate, your Tommy Trembles of the world. And you also need to rely on ownership to understand leverage. That is the #1 word in all of DFS, leverage. Players who are lower owned than they should be, so you know who to play. And the DFS blueprint will show you exactly that and a whole lot more for all of these main slates, showdown slates, the main slates, everything you need to win more in DFS while spending less time doing it, my 5-step system that I'm sharing now with all of you. It is linked down below in the description. You can join the thousands of other people using it right now to win more often and spend less time losing. Best of luck on this Thursday slate, and I'll see you all in the next one.